So the Nike Vaporfly, there is a lot of hype around this shoe, in particular because no matter what you do, you can't avoid seeing that world records are being shattered, and in particular with this shoe, the Nike Vaporfly Next Percent or 4%. This shoe sort of came on the market a couple of years ago and made a big splash when the first world attempt to break the 2-hour marathon record was done by Eliud Kipchoge and a group of other runners during the Nike's Breaking 2 event. At that time, they came pretty close but failed. Nonetheless, what was sort of noticed was for the first time these athletes were wearing a different kind of shoe. Of course, Eliud Kipchoge continued his training, and in 2019 was able to not only break the 2-hour world record, but also officially broke the world record for the marathon, which is different because there's different rules based on whether you do it in certain settings. And then also in 2019, we've seen a wide range of other records being broken at all distances, and many of them using the Nike 4% or the Nike Next Percent, the Vaporflies. So why is this happening? Well, Nike first came out with some lab results demonstrating that their new shoes essentially increased efficiency by 4%. Now, what does that mean? 4% efficiency on a treadmill. It can be one of those sort of obscure kinds of findings that in the lab might be heightened, and when you think of it, it doesn't really translate to your finishing times. For instance, 4% energy efficiency may not actually lead to a 4% increase in your race performance. Well, it turns out that it does indeed do just that. In fact, the New York Times, using data from over 1 million marathons and half marathons from April 2014 to 2019, has demonstrated using some pretty impressive big data and a number of robust and rigorous strategies of analyses that the Nike Vaporfly, the 4% and the Next Percent, have these incredible and dramatic benefits in race performances. Now, it's still a question about whether or not it is actually the shoe or the belief that the shoe carries. There's a lot of research from colleagues of mine at Stanford who look at mindset or placebo effects. In fact, they find that just because something is a placebo doesn't mean it's not effective. So believing that the Nike will indeed have these beneficial effects because of the lab studies and because of all these incredible athletes shattering world records might be the reason why people are doing better across the range of performance levels. So maybe it's mindset, but maybe it's the shoe. Nike certainly believes that it has something to do with the physical attributes of the shoe. In fact, it is one of the first ones that's challenged the long-standing norms around what an efficient shoe for a long-distance sport or long-distance run is. Up until maybe a few years ago, the sort of the long-standing view was that the lighter and the thinner the shoe, the better it was. Essentially, that was the only dimension in which shoes were trying to improve, make it as light as possible. That usually meant having a little bit less cushioning, a little bit less foam, and you would have all these athletes running with barely no cushioning, and it became a test of how tough you were, how strong you were, and how long you were willing to spend in recovery. That was the ultimate benchmark for what made a good shoe. In fact, there's a general rule of thumb that said that every 1 gram that your shoe weighed more, that led to about a 1-minute difference at an elite performer's marathon distance finish time. So a lot of thinking went into this, and the science was lighter was better. And so then Nike comes on the scene and says, well, actually, maybe it's not just the lightness. Of course, it matters a lot, but maybe it's other things. Maybe it's how much foam you have that leads to a return in the energy that you put in. In fact, their claims are that these shoes lead to about a 85% return of energy, which is basically unparalleled with any other shoe. That wearing these shoes, every foot strike leads to about an 85% increase in energy return, which is pretty ambitious. It's a pretty bold statement. May be true. And certainly the race results that we're seeing from New York Times big data analyses seems to suggest that maybe there is something to this. And so the question for you is, if you're thinking about trying to do a pretty good time on a long distance race, should you buy this shoe? It's not a cheap shoe. It's still about a $250 price tag for this shoe, which has to require a significant investment, and you have to be intentional with whether or not you think it's worth it for you. If you're trying to get a PR, or if you're trying to qualify for Boston, many athletes are finding themselves buying the shoe. And so if you're looking at the field and you find that a third up to a half of the racers who are trying to qualify for Boston are wearing this shoe, the question is, do you also buy this shoe? And so again, that's a personal question for you, but in terms of fairness, if everyone's wearing it and you're not, what does that mean? Of course, the international committees around what requirements and standards are observed when it comes to shoe technology have not weighed in on what is legal, and as far as they can tell, everything that Nike has done here, which consists of two things. One is adding a fair bit of foam in the midsole, and in fact, this shoe, the Next Percent, has lowered its drop from heel to toe down to 8%, which in the Nike 4% was as high as 11% drop height. But then the other sort of consistent element in both shoes is that they both have this carbon fiber plate that runs through the shoe that almost catapults you every time you take a step and you bend your foot. So it stores the energy and then pushes it back forward. At least that's their claim. So definitely there's a lot of compelling evidence. The New York Times and their analyses, as I mentioned, used data from over 1 million marathons, and they found that indeed the individuals using various forms of analyses that are wearing these shoes have about a 4 or 5% advantage in their finish times. And they make a few other observations. For instance, in 2019, of all of the sub 3-hour finish times, 41% of individuals were wearing this shoe. And so it's not this sort of small niche of individuals who are doing it. The word has gotten out, and everyone's catching on to the value of wearing these shoes. The question is, are you going to do the same? That question was posed to me as well, and I think given the price tag, my first reaction would have been to say, no way, I'm not going to fork out $250. I could be spending that on so many other more important things. But my wife knows that I've been training and hoping to qualify for Boston. Last year, I made an attempt, my most serious attempt to qualify for Boston, and I fell 27 seconds short. I fell 27 seconds short of being able to enter into Boston on the back of months and months, and if not years of training. And so that's pretty discouraging. It's pretty disheartening when you realize that you were that close. And the question is, would this shoe have made the difference? And so my wife, who's quite clear on my efforts and my goals, knowing that I've recommitted to trying again because I don't do well with an unfulfilled goal, went ahead and surprised me with a shoe. Now, when I first came home and I was unboxing the shoe, I'm like, oh no, not this shoe, because up until last year, the shoe came in only two hideous colors, I thought. This sort of very vibrant pink or this fluorescent green. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to be able to get onto a field or a track or a race wearing these extremely bold, almost pompous colors. Like, I actually felt that it was too much of a bold statement. Now, don't get me wrong, with the size and the amount of foam and the sort of the sharp edge, shark fin in the back, you're still making a very bold statement. But this year what they've done is they've come up with this new color scheme called the Hikene. I'm not sure, Hikene, if I'm saying it right. But essentially it's a combination of this, what they're calling an Aurora green and a hyper crimson. So it's an Aurora green and hyper crimson with this metallic swoosh. And what's cool about it as well is that each shoe actually comes in a different color. So you're kind of wearing a combination of different colors that together don't look that bad. And I'll be honest, I mean, it's more of a blue than a green to me. And when I first opened the box, I'm like, wow, this is actually kind of a nice shoe, and I can see myself wearing this. So because it was bought for me, I didn't have to debate about whether I could fork out that much money, and because it was a gift, I felt more inclined to accept it. Because of the new colors, I was less sort of repulsed by having to wear these shoes. And certainly wearing them around the house and on the treadmill, I found that it's really living up to its expectation of giving you that bounce. Like, it's almost like you're running on clouds. Every step you take feels like you're sort of being pushed forward. And so I found that to be quite interesting. How that translates to a race, or even if it's natural running in these shoes in a race, I'm not sure. But I, for one, am going to give it a try, and we'll find out if this helps. Of course, it's hard to isolate whether indeed it's the shoe or whether it's the cumulative training from multiple years and sort of the wiser approach to marathon training or marathon racing. But we'll see if the combined strategies come together for me, and I wish you all the best in your efforts as you continue to train for and attempt some personal records with this incredible sport. Whether you're doing it for fun or therapy like I do, just to get out and get my head clear, or you're trying to see if you can compete at some level, whether personal or with friends or at some competitive level, then hopefully this video gave you something to think about and helps in your decision.